I discovered my father's secret family and the dark truth that almost killed me. Reddit stories. They say family is everything, the blood that binds us, the mirror of our souls. For as long as I can remember, my family was a quiet, predictable rhythm. My father, a reserved and meticulous man with a stern jaw and eyes like polished granite. My mother, tender and soft-spoken, always flitting like a shadow just outside his reach. And me, the only child, carrying the weight of their silences like a second skin. We lived in a modest house on Sycamore Lane, in a suburb so peaceful, it practically whispered lullabies through the trees. Our next-door neighbors were the Mercers, a widow and her 2 kids, friendly in the way neighbors are, with waving hands over garden fences and borrowed sugar. We never got close. Not really. And that was how life moved in our corner of the world, predictable, muted, ordinary. But I've learned that ordinary is often the most elaborate disguise of all. My father worked long hours as a regional manager for a packaging company. He had this old leather briefcase he carried every day, worn at the corners, its brass buckles gleaming from his obsessive polishing. He left precisely at 7:00 a.m. and returned at 6:15 p.m. Dinner was always at 6:30. He would nod once before eating, eyes fixed on his plate. Conversations were brief and practical. Emotion was not his currency. Even as a child, I could sense an invisible barrier between us. He never raised his voice, never raised his hand. He didn't need to. His presence alone was a boundary. It wasn't until I turned 23 and moved back home to save money while job hunting that I noticed the cracks forming in the structure I thought I knew. My mother had grown quieter, thinner, eyes sunken and darting with some unspeakable worry. She began taking long walks at dusk, always in the direction of the Mercer's house. I assumed it was grief. Her sister had passed away that spring. But grief doesn't usually carry itself with such restraint. It trembles, it breaks, it explodes. Her sadness was composed, rehearsed, and then there was my father, more distracted than usual. Once I caught him staring out the window toward the Mercer's home, jaw clenched so tightly I could see the pulse in his neck. One evening, I got home from a failed interview in the city and found my mother sitting in the living room, stiff and pale, a cup of untouched tea trembling in her hands. She looked up at me like she'd been waiting for something, anything. "Your father. He might be late tonight," she said without meeting my eyes. There was something in her tone, something final. That night, as silence draped the house like a burial cloth, I heard voices through the thin walls. His voice, hers, low and frantic. Words I couldn't make out, but their urgency clawed at my chest. I pressed my ear to the wall like a child again, hoping to decode the rhythm of our family's heartbeat. But all I heard was the shattering of a cup and the hollow echo of a slammed door. When I came down the next morning, my father was already gone, and my mother was seated in the kitchen, staring at nothing, the broken pieces of a porcelain mug laid out like a puzzle she no longer wished to solve. Weeks passed. I began noticing small things. A blue ribbon, identical to one I'd seen in our neighbor's daughter's hair in the back seat of my dad's car. An unfamiliar name, Lee, scribbled in the margin of one of his documents. A receipt from a boutique 2 towns over, listing 2 women's jackets. I could have ignored it, told myself stories. But something inside me, some gut-deep instinct, refused to be silenced. So I started watching. The Mercer's house was mostly quiet. The son, a boy of maybe 17, always kept to himself, hood up, eyes down. The daughter, younger, cheerful, would skip rope in the driveway, humming songs I knew from my own childhood. That startled me more than anything. How did she know that lullaby? My mother used to sing it to me when I was 3. Then, one afternoon I saw it. My father stepping out of the Mercer house. No briefcase. No coat. Just him with an expression I didn't recognize. Soft, almost human. He bent down and ruffled the little girl's hair. She smiled, called him Dad. The world didn't stop. Birds still chirped, cars still passed, the sun still glowed behind the clouds. But everything inside me was collapsing. A secret had been living next door, breathing our same air, watching us through thin walls and thicker lies. I ran upstairs, dug through my father's study. Buried in a locked drawer, which he had always said was for work documents, was a small wooden box. Inside photos, not of us, of them, the Mercers, but not as we knew them. These were beach trips, birthdays, school plays, him with them. Holding hands, laughing, smiling. Photos dated back 15 years. They weren't neighbors. They were his other family. I dropped the box. Sat there in the wreckage of realization. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the fact that he had been so good at it. 2 families, 2 lives, 20 years of precision. My mother had known. She must have. That's why she never looked him in the eye. That's why she walked with ghosts. She hadn't been quiet out of grief. She had been silenced by the weight of complicity or perhaps resignation. I confronted her that night. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She just said, "I hoped you'd never find out." I asked her how long she had known. "Since the beginning," she replied, like it was the simplest answer in the world. She told me the truth then, that my father had fallen in love with someone else years ago, but couldn't leave us. That he promised to take care of both families, to be present, to avoid the devastation a divorce would bring. So he had built 2 lives, 2 homes, 2 routines. A man divided by duty, not desire. And she had let him, because she loved him, because she thought that was enough. But love isn't always enough. Sometimes it's a lie we tell ourselves to sleep better. I spent days walking the streets in a daze. I watched the Mercers from a distance. Wondered if the kids knew. Wondered if the woman he visited had ever walked through our door. And then I saw something that stopped me cold. The boy, the one with the hood always up. He looked up, met my eyes. We stared, and in that single moment I knew. His face, his jawline, his eyes, like polished granite. We shared a father. And suddenly, I wasn't an only child anymore. But the worst twist was still waiting. Something none of us could have imagined. Because one night, I got a call. Not from home. From the hospital. He had collapsed at work. Stroke. Massive. Too fast to say goodbye. The secret died with him. But it didn't stay buried. Because the will changed everything. And what it revealed would tear us even further apart. The morning of the will reading was overcast and still, like the sky was holding its breath. We gathered in the law office, an elegant space with dark oak furniture and an air of quiet authority that made you sit up straighter, even when your world had fallen sideways. My mother wore black, though he hadn't wanted a funeral, just cremation, simple, efficient, predictable, like everything else he did. The Mercers were there too, seated on the opposite side of the room like we were strangers at an auction, bidding on the pieces of a life none of us had truly owned. The air was thick with something unspoken, but tangible, resentment maybe, or grief in its rawest, ugliest form. The lawyer, Mr. Renfield, a man whose face seemed carved out of wax, adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Mr. Daniel Everett's final will and testament." He began opening a leather folder with the kind of solemnity usually reserved for church altars and courtrooms. Amended 7 months ago. 7 months. That date punched me in the stomach. That was around the time I moved back home. He read the standard formalities first. Executor duties, debts, the usual fluff that floats on the surface before the weight pulls you under. And then it began. To my wife, Eleanor, I leave the house on Sycamore Lane, along with its contents and the joint savings account. My mother gave a slow blink, unreadable. No reaction. She already knew. To my daughter, Emily, that's me. I sat straighter. I leave my collection of first edition books, the contents of my study, and a trust fund with the remaining balance of my personal investment account, to be made accessible upon her 30th birthday. I should have felt something, gratitude maybe, or confusion. But all I felt was a hollow ache. A trust fund. That wasn't love. That wasn't an apology. That was a band-aid on a severed limb. And then came the part that changed everything. To Lee Mercer, I leave the lake house property in Glenhaven and the associated account for its maintenance and upkeep. To her children, Owen and Lily, I leave my secondary life insurance policy and full ownership of the business shares held under the name Everett Limited Holdings. The room went silent. Lily, that cheerful little girl who jumped rope. Owen, the boy with my father's eyes. My mouth went dry. He hadn't just supported them, he'd planned for them. He'd built for them. While I thought I was his only child, he was laying foundations for two others right next door. He had a business I didn't know existed, a house I had never visited, and insurance, a second policy, hidden behind corporate shields and false names. I looked at my mother, expecting outrage or betrayal. Instead, she simply closed her eyes, exhaled, and whispered, "He kept his promises." That cut deeper than anything else. Lee Mercer didn't look at us. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, knuckles white. Owen stared at the floor, jaw clenched. Lily was too young to understand the tension in the air, her legs swinging, head tilted, eyes wide and innocent. I wanted to hate them. I really did, but I couldn't. They didn't ask for this any more than I did. As we left the office, my mother touched my arm lightly. "Let it go," she murmured, but I couldn't. Something was wrong. The will didn't feel like closure. It felt like a key to a door no one wanted to admit existed. Over the next few weeks, I started digging. The lawyer had mentioned Everett Limited Holdings. I'd never heard of it. There was no record in his official job history, no correspondence, no business cards. So I started from scratch. Old receipts, envelopes, digital footprints. I pieced together fragments like a detective in a crime that hadn't yet been classified. Eventually, I found it. An address in Glenhaven, not the lake house but a small office suite, registered to a shell company folded inside a dozen others. I drove there. Alone, heart pound. The building was nondescript, 2 stories, with a fading plaque by the door. Inside, everything was clean but deserted, like someone had packed up in a hurry. I found a locked file cabinet, picked the lock. Thank you, childhood curiosity and too much time alone. Inside were folders, names, receipts, bank records. One folder stood out, labeled Project Marigold. Inside were photos, not of Lee, not of the children, but of my mother in Glenhaven, with a child I didn't recognize, a girl, maybe 4 years old, holding my mother's hand. In every photo, they looked like a family, not ours, but a family. I dropped the folder. The air spun. Had my mother been involved with another child? Who was this girl? I drove home, thoughts splintering, hands shaking. My mother was in the kitchen, peeling apples with slow, deliberate strokes. I placed the photo on the counter. She didn't even flinch. "You weren't supposed to find that," she said softly. "Who is she?" She sat, silent. Then, "Her name was Clara. She was your sister." My mind buckled under the weight of her words. She died. A long time ago. I couldn't breathe. She wasn't his. She was mine. From before. Before what? I gave her up. To protect you? To protect us? Her voice broke for the first time. I kept in touch. Sometimes. Quietly. Until she got sick. That little girl with the bright eyes. She had died. My half-sister. A sibling I never knew existed. Buried in silence and secrecy. And Dad knew. I choked. "Wes," she said. Eventually, he helped with the hospital bills. That's why he created the shell company. He used it to move money, to protect everyone. Everything I thought I knew about my parents was unraveling. They were 2 strangers playing house in the ruins of their own pasts. And I was just the echo of decisions made long before I was born. But the story wasn't done, because a week later I received a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a USB drive and a note. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone. But you deserve the truth. About everything." It was my father's handwriting. I plugged in the drive with trembling hands. Videos, journal entries, confessions. My father had known about Clara from the beginning. She wasn't just my mother's child. She was his too. From a brief affair before their marriage. My mother had been pregnant when they married, and they had agreed to keep Clara a secret. But when she got sick, he couldn't stand by. He started Project Marigold to fund her treatment without raising suspicion. He had spent years trying to save a daughter he never got to hold. And after she died, guilt tore him apart. That's when he met Lee. Not as a lover at first, but as someone who had lost a child too. She had miscarried. They met in grief counseling. One thing led to another. And when her children came later, he felt he had been given a second chance at fatherhood. I wasn't betrayed. I was collateral damage in a lifetime of pain. My father hadn't been living two lives. He had been trying to stitch one broken one back together. But secrets rot, no matter how noble their roots. And then came the last video. My father, older, wary eyes dimmer than I remembered. If you're still watching, I need you to do something. There's one more thing, one more truth, not about me. About you. He paused, took a breath. You weren't an only child, but not just because of Clara. You have another sibling, Alev, out there. He looked straight at the camera. Her name is Hannah, and she's looking for you. The screen went black. And just like that, the story wasn't ending. It was only just beginning. The silence that followed that final video wasn't just heavy. It was suffocating. The kind that creeps into your bones and takes up permanent residence. I must have sat there for an hour, the laptop screen long since gone black, my hands clenched into fists, so tight my nails left crescent moons in my palms. Her name is Hannah, and she's looking for you. That sentence echoed like a siren in my skull. I wasn't done unraveling the lie of my father's double life, the truth about Clara, the reality of Owen and Lily next door. And now there was another thread, another sibling, another person whose entire existence had been hidden from me like a sealed envelope in the attic. I didn't sleep that night. My mind darted through 1,000 scenarios. Who was Hannah? How old was she? Where was she? Why had she never shown up before now? And why, of all people, had my father decided I should be the one to find her? The next morning, I replayed the video twice, just to make sure I hadn't imagined it. But there it was, clear as day. Her name, her existence, and a chilling sense that this final secret was the most carefully guarded of all. I checked the USB again, hoping for more clues. Hidden folder, a document, anything. And there it was, one more file, mislabeled in a sea of generics. A text file named Voice 2071. Text. I opened it. It wasn't an invoice. It was a single address. Hannah Keller, 2012 Hayworth Road, Glenhaven. My heart kicked. Glenhaven again. That place wasn't just a vacation town for us. It was the nucleus of my father's spiderweb of lives. And once again I was being pulled back into its orbit. I didn't tell my mother. I couldn't. Not yet. Something about this felt different, more volatile. Clara had been her secret, kept out of guilt and grief. Owen and Lily were my father's way of rewriting a chapter he couldn't bear to reread. But Hannah? She was something else, something neither of them had ever mentioned, and yet, somehow, she was still mine to find. I drove to Glenhaven that afternoon. The trees lining Hayworth Road were tall and skeletal in the cold wind, casting long shadows over cracked pavement and quiet lawns. Number 2D12 was a small, weather-beaten house with ivy crawling up the side like a hand trying to claw its way out. The mailbox read, Keller. No answer at the door. I didn't knock. Not yet. Instead, I sat in my car and watched. After 2 hours, a woman appeared, late 20s, maybe early 30s. Long chestnut hair pulled back into a messy bun, gray hoodie, jeans tucked into old boots. She was carrying a stack of mail and a grocery bag. When she turned slightly, I caught a glimpse of her face. My breath caught. She had my eyes. No, not mine. She was him. Same jawline, same intensity, same quiet fire simmering just under the surface. She didn't see me. She just went inside, door creaking shut behind her. And I sat there, heart thudding, because somehow, without a single word spoken, I knew. That was her. That was Hannah. But how could she be looking for me, like my father claimed, if she didn't even know I existed? I waited 3 more days, watching her, learning her patterns. She worked at the local library, I discovered. Always opened the place early, stayed late. She didn't seem to have many friends, at least not that I could see. She moved like someone used to solitude. But there was something else. Something familiar in the way she looked over her shoulder, like she never quite felt safe. Like she knew shadows could lie. On the fourth day, I finally got out of the car. I waited outside the library until her shift ended. When she walked out, I forced myself to speak. "Henna." She stopped cold. Her eyes narrowed. "Do I know you?" "My name's Emily." My voice was shaking. "Will we have the same father?" She didn't respond right away, just stared. Then, quietly, "Daniel Everett." I nodded. She looked like she might vomit. "I knew it," she said, voice cracking. I knew he had another family, but the next few minutes were a blur. We sat on a bench outside the library as the sky turned orange and gray with dusk. She told me everything, and what I learned shattered the remnants of my father's myth forever. Hannah had been born to a woman named Sarah Keller. They'd met when my father had been in Glenhaven on business, one of his many conferences. It had been short-lived, barely more than a summer fling, but when Sarah found out she was pregnant, he hadn't vanished. No, he'd stayed involved, secretly, sent money, visited a few times a year. He even paid for her schooling, but he never told her about us, or Lee, or Clara. She thought she was the secret. "I knew there was more," Hannah said. "He always seemed sad, guilty, like he was trying to make up for something. But when I was 16, he stopped coming. Said it was too dangerous, said someone might find out." Her mother had died a few years later. Cancer. And Hannah had been alone ever since. "You said he told you I was looking for you?" she asked, incredulous. "He left a video. Said you were out there. Said you deserved the truth." She laughed bitterly. He always had a way of making abandonment sound like a gift. But she agreed to meet again. We started piecing things together, our timelines, our stories. And slowly, painfully, we reconstructed the man who had stitched us into separate corners of his world like mismatched patches on a quilt. And then Hannah showed me something I hadn't expected. She had a letter, handwritten. From him. It was dated only a few weeks before he died. "Hannah, if you're reading this, then I didn't make it in time. I need you to understand something. Everything I did out of fear. Of losing you. Of losing all of you. I lived in compartments because I didn't know how to be whole. But you were never a mistake. You have a sister. Her name is Emily. She's stronger than I ever was. Find her. She'll know what to do. Forgive me if you can." "Dad," I cried reading it. Not because it made anything okay, but because it made him human, flawed, broken, regretful. And then Hannah said something that chilled me to my core. "Do you know a man named Mason Leary?" "No," I replied. "He started asking questions a few months ago. About our dad. Said he was a private investigator, but he didn't act like one. He knew too much. He asked about Clara." "About you?" My blood ran cold. We hadn't been the only ones unraveling the secrets. Someone else had been watching too, and they were one step ahead. I drove home in the dark, heart hammering. When I got to my house, the door was slightly ajar. That door had been locked. I stepped inside. Nothing seemed disturbed. But when I reached my room, my stomach dropped. The wooden box from my father's study, the one with the old photos, was gone. And on my pillow, a single sheet of paper, typed. "Some secrets don't want to be found. Stop digging, Emily. Or the next person to vanish won't be a memory. It'll be you." Suddenly, this wasn't just about family. It was about danger. And I wasn't the only one in the crosshairs. The paper trembled in my hands, though the words were perfectly still, calm even. That was what terrified me most. Whoever had broken into my room hadn't stolen valuables or trashed the place. They'd taken one thing, left one note. They weren't angry. They were careful. Strategic. That kind of menace doesn't scream. It whispers. And when a whisper finds its way to your pillow, it means they were close enough to breathe beside you. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the corner of my room with a baseball bat I hadn't touched in years, every shadow suddenly a threat, every creak in the floorboards a countdown. My mother slept downstairs, unaware that our lives had just crossed some invisible line from uncomfortable truths into something darker. something dangerous. I wanted to tell her, but I didn't know how. Hey, Mom, remember all the trauma from Dad's double life? Well, now we're being stalked by someone who knows too much and wants me silent. Oh yeah, that would go over great with morning coffee. Instead, I called Hannah. I told her everything, the break-in, the missing box, the note. Her voice went cold instantly. We need to talk, she said. No. We met an all-night diner 2 towns over. The kind with flickering fluorescent lights and a waitress who looked like she'd seen too much of everything. Hannah slid into the booth across from me, eyes dark, lips pressed tight. She handed me a folder. I didn't tell you everything, she said. I didn't know if I could trust you, but after this, she tapped the folder. You deserve to see it. But inside were old newspaper clippings, faded photos. A few grainy printouts from websites that looked like they hadn't been updated since the 90s. One headline stood out, local businessman implicated in whistleblower's disappearance. And below it, a name I recognized instantly, Daniel Everett, my father. The article was dated 15 years ago, the same year Clara died, the same year he met Lee. It detailed an investigation into a packaging conglomerate, his employer at the time, allegedly tied to offshore environmental violations, including illegal dumping and unsafe labor practices in third-world countries. A whistleblower named Mason Leary had come forward with files, audio recordings, everything. But just before the hearing, Leary vanished. Disappeared. No body. No suspects. Just gone. The company denied everything. So did my father, who had been a mid-level executive back then. The case fell apart. No convictions. But the whispers never stopped. Mason Leary, I murmured. You said someone by that name came asking about us. Hannah nodded. He's not dead. I think he went underground. And now he's back. Watching. But why now? Why us? She hesitated, then pulled out another photo from a security cam, time-stamped 2 months ago. It showed a man in a hoodie standing outside the library. His face was turned away, but in his hand was the same leather briefcase my father had carried every day of his life. My throat went dry. That's not possible. I thought the same, Hannah said, until I did a little more digging. She pulled out another document, a recent file, bank transfers, from a dormant account in my father's name to one registered to an alias Jonas K. Leary, Mason's brother, she whispered. He was in debt, deep. My theory. He gave Mason's identity a new face, a way back in. We sat in silence for a long time, the pieces rearranging themselves in my head like a cursed puzzle. So you think Mason's alive? Using your father's name to get revenge for the case that ruined his life? No, she said. I think he's doing something worse. I think he's trying to finish what he started. It made a twisted kind of sense. My father's life had never been about duality. It was a network, an ecosystem of secrets he kept spinning to stay in control. But the moment he died, the balance collapsed. All the sealed boxes he'd kept under wraps began to open. And Mason, if it really was him, was there, waiting, watching, knowing. And now we were tangled in his web. The next day, Hannah and I went to the Glenhaven office. We dug deeper, breaking into another file cabinet we hadn't noticed before. And inside, buried beneath old invoices and shredded folders, was a handwritten journal. It wasn't my father's. The entries were dated over several years. Some were scrawled in panic, others neat and deliberate. All of them signed with the initials ML. I've followed Everett for 10 years. Watched the way he moves. Predictable like a machine. 2 families. 2 towns. 1 secret. Project Marigold wasn't just about a sick child. It was about guilt and leverage. He didn't just fund her treatment. He hired someone to bury her records. I looked at Hannah, stunned. You think Clara's death wasn't natural? She whispered. Maybe. Or maybe he was just hiding how much he spent. The connections, the lies. Another entry chilled me to the bone. Emily is the key. She has no idea. None of them do. When Daniel dies, she inherits more than money. She inherits the code. What code? I asked. Hannah flipped through the rest of the pages, then stopped at one, covered entirely in symbols and numbers. It looked like gibberish, until I noticed the pattern. Dates. Every number matched a date from our lives. Clara's death, Hannah's birth, the day I moved home, my father's will. This wasn't just a journal. It was a cipher. Someone had been tracking us for decades, waiting for the right moment to act. And that moment had come. When I got back home, I finally confronted my mother, showed her the letter, the journal, the photos. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply said, "I knew this would happen." My world tilted again. "What do you mean?" She walked to the cupboard, pulled out an old shoebox and handed it to me. Inside were dozens of letters, all from someone named Jonas. She opened one. It read, "Eleanor, he lied to you, know it. But I can prove it. Meet me at the lake house. Alone." A J. My mother looked at me with tired eyes. Jonas was real. And he was right. Your father wasn't just hiding families. He was hiding crimes. What kind of crimes? She hesitated. He had people followed, tracked, threatened. I didn't want to believe it, but I think Jonas had evidence. That's why Daniel cut him off, why he vanished. And you didn't tell me. I was trying to protect you. But protection doesn't matter when the past is clawing its way into your present. The final piece fell into place that night. I got an email from an anonymous sender. Just one line. Ask Hannah about the cabin in Black Hollow. I called her immediately. She went silent, then said, "We're going to need shovels." Because whatever was buried there wasn't just a secret. It was the truth we'd both been running from. And someone didn't want it unearthed. The road to Black Hollow wasn't on any map. It forked off a county highway where the trees grew too close together and the wind whispered things you couldn't quite catch. According to Hannah, the cabin had belonged to a man named Victor, one of our father's former business contacts. She remembered it only because he'd taken her there once, briefly, when she was very young. She'd assumed it was a hunting trip, just a detour. Now, years later, she realized it had been something else entirely. Something strategic. A memory planted and then buried. But buried memories have roots, and roots always find their way back to the surface. We arrived just before dusk. The trees bowed inward, casting shadows like claws across the dirt path. The cabin was barely standing, weathered wood, a collapsed porch, windows like blank eyes. Hannah didn't speak. Neither did I. We could feel the weight of something waiting inside. Not just secrets, consequences. We had brought 2 shovels, a flashlight, a crowbar, and a camera. Not because we were paranoid, because we knew that whatever we found, we'd need proof. We pried open the door, and the smell of mold and rot rushed out to meet us. Dust hung in the air like fog. Cobwebs draped from the rafters. But the cabin wasn't empty. There were recent footprints in the dirt floor. Someone had been here. "Look," Hannah whispered, pointing to a hatch in the floor, mostly hidden beneath a broken rug. The wood around it was newer than the rest, clean sanded, fitted with a heavy-duty padlock. I dropped to my knees. The lock wasn't that old, maybe a year or 2. Someone had sealed this up recently. We got it open after 20 minutes of struggling. Rust fought us, but eventually it gave. The hatch creaked up with a groan, revealing a set of stairs that descended into blackness. "After you," Hannah muttered, forcing a smirk that didn't quite reach her eyes. The air down there was colder, drier. We descended slowly, each creak of the wood echoing like a warning. At the bottom was a small room. Concrete floor, plywood walls, a single bare bulb dangling from the ceiling. But it wasn't the room that caught my breath. It was what was inside it. Stacks of boxes, metal shelves, a filing cabinet, and in the far corner, an old computer, powered on, humming quietly in the dark. "What the hell is this?" I whispered. We moved quickly, scanning labels. Most boxes were marked with dates and numbers, but a few had names. E. Everett H. Keller, L. Mercer. There were even files labeled C. Everett, Clara. Hannah found a photo. It was of our father, standing beside a man we didn't recognize. On the back, someone had written, Plovey H., Black Hollow 2008. Probably. But there was more. A series of ledgers, all handwritten, listing names, cash transfers, locations, some overseas, others domestic, a smuggling laundering, environmental cover-ups. It was all there, dated, signed, meticulously organized. It was damning and terrifying. "This is the code," Hannah said. "The cipher from the journal. These records." But I couldn't stop staring at the computer. It was running an old operating system, encrypted, heavily secured. The login screen blinked at us, waiting. I tried the obvious. Username Daniel. Everett password Marigold. It unlocked. Inside were folders, hundreds of them. Documents, spreadsheets, email recordings. My father had been keeping track of everything. His business deals, the people he paid off, the people he threatened, even surveillance footage. There were clips of our house, the Mercer house, Hannah's old apartment, dates going back 10, 15 years. One file was labeled Leary Termination Report. We opened it. It was a transcript, a recorded conversation. My father, another man, talking about Mason. "He knows too much," the man said. "He's digging again," said my father. "You want me to handle it?" "No, not yet. We have time." The date at 2 weeks before Mason vanished. Hannah sank into a chair, pale. He didn't vanish. He was disappeared. There was another file, a letter, unsigned, but written in our father's voice. "If this is found, then I have failed to protect it. They will come. For everything. This archive, it is the insurance policy. But it is also the match. Use it wisely. Once it's lit, there's no going back." We copied everything to a flash drive. Every document, every folder. It took nearly an hour. Every minute I expected to hear footsteps above, but none came. The woods stayed quiet. We buried the original hard drive in the basement floor. Dug a shallow hole, sealed it in plastic. Not because we wanted to hide it, but because we didn't know if we were being watched. And something about this place, this cabin, felt like a trap someone else might return to. As we left, Hannah asked me, "Do you think Mason's still alive?" I hesitated. "Yes, but he's not the one I'm afraid of anymore." Back in town, things moved quickly. We encrypted the files, sent backup copies to 3 different email addresses under fake names. We needed leverage, protection, because what we had wasn't just a family scandal, it was evidence of federal crimes. And then the calls started. Blocked numbers, silent lines, breathing on the other end. A car following us for 3 blocks before disappearing. My mother found a note in the mailbox. No envelope, no signature. Black Hollow was a mistake. There won't be another. I told her everything that night. For the first time, she wept. Not for him, for us. "I thought I was saving you," she whispered, by keeping the truth buried. But I was only delaying the fall. We made a decision that night, to go public. But before we could release anything, something happened that changed everything again. Hannah vanished. No phone call, no warning, just gone. Her apartment was locked. Her phone disconnected. The library said she'd called in sick, but I knew she'd been taken, or worse. And then 3 days later I received a package, no return address. Inside was a photo. Hannah, tied to a chair. I terrified. On the back, scrawled in red ink, "You were warned. The war my father started wasn't over. It was only just beginning, and now it was mine to finish." The photo haunted me, not just because Hannah looked afraid, but because for the first time she looked like me. Raw, exposed, and utterly betrayed by the one person who was supposed to protect her, our father. We were reflections of the same truth, staring back through cracked glass. I held the picture in trembling hands, trying not to let my imagination spiral into worst-case scenarios. But it already had. She was gone. And whoever had her didn't just want silence. They wanted control. They wanted everything buried again. I went through the plan again and again in my head. I couldn't go to the police. Not yet. This wasn't just a case of kidnapping or fraud. It was layered in decades of corruption, forged identities, blackmail, shell companies, and deeply buried secrets that spanned beyond my family. If I stepped wrong, I wouldn't just lose Hannah. I'd lose the story, the proof, the truth. So I played the only card I had left. I went back to the lake house, the one my father left to Lee Mercer, the place he'd always kept at arm's length, even from us. I'd never been there before, only seen it in the documents. But it was where this had to end, where it would end. Something about that place had been central to everything: Clara's secret, Hannah's existence, the final shift in my father's life, maybe even Mason Leary's disappearance. The drive was long and quiet. Too quiet. Trees blurred past like guards lining the road, solemn and still. I kept checking my mirrors. I didn't know who I expected to see. A black SUV, a shadow on a motorcycle, a man in a suit with dead eyes. Instead, I saw nothing, which made it worse. When I arrived, the lake house looked like a dream frozen in time. White siding, wide porch, glass windows reflecting the water, serene, peaceful. A lie. The key still worked. He had left it in the file labeled Glenhaven on the USB. I stepped inside, heart thudding. The house was clean, too clean, almost like someone was still using it. And then I heard it. A floorboard creaked upstairs. I froze. I didn't call out. I didn't run. I reached into my bag and pulled out the flash drive, the bait, and I laid it on the coffee table. Then I sat down and waited. 10 minutes passed, 15. And then a voice. "You shouldn't have come here." I turned slowly. A man stood in the doorway. Mid-40s, sharp suit, silver streaks in his hair. His face was familiar, but I couldn't place it. Not exactly. "You're Mason," I said. He smiled faintly. "No, I'm what's left of him." He stepped into the room and sat across from me like we were about to play a polite game of chess. "You've done well," he said. "Better than I expected. Most people run when the lies start peeling away. You chased them. Where's Hannah?" "She's safe. For now. That depends on you." "I brought the drive," I said. "I know. I was counting on it." He reached for it, but I didn't let go. "You said you wanted the truth," I said. "Then why keep hiding it?" He looked tired for the first time. "Because the truth, Emily, doesn't fix things. It destroys them. Your father figured that out too late. I tried to warn him. He didn't listen. You disappeared. I had to. They were going to kill me, so I made a deal. I'd vanish, keep quiet, and they'd leave my family alone. But you didn't keep quiet. I saw what he did to Clara. I saw the files, the offshore deals, the manipulation, the surveillance. You think he was a family man with a guilty conscience? No, he was a chess master. Every move calculated. Every daughter a piece on the board. Even me. He looked me dead in the eye. Especially you. The room spun. I wanted to deny it. Scream. But something inside me already knew. He built a firewall around you. Mason continued. Raised you in the clean version of his life. So if everything burned down, you'd still look innocent. Believable. You were his exit plan. The trust fund, the will. The USB. All of it was meant for you to carry the illusion of the Everett legacy forward. Go. Then, why did he tell me about Hannah? Because in the end, I think he wanted to be caught, or forgiven. Or maybe he just didn't want to die without someone knowing the real story. I leaned back, breath shallow. What do you want? I asked. Not money, not revenge, just exposure, truth in daylight. But you have to release it. Not me. You're the one people will believe. And Hannah. She'll be returned as soon as the files go public. And if I don't? His face hardened. Then the same thing that happened to Clara happens again. And again. Until the story dies. I stared at him. The drive was still in my hand. But there's something you don't know, I said. He raised an eyebrow. I made copies. Sent them to 3 journalists. One at a political news site, one at a tech outlet, and one at a local station, with instructions to release everything if I go missing. His smile faltered. I'm not your pawn, I said. Not his. Not yours? His jaw clenched. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he stood. You're smart, he said. Just like him. No, I said. Nothing like him? And I meant it. He left without another word. The next day, Hannah was found in a motel 30 miles away, unharmed, drugged but alive. She remembered almost nothing, just a room, a masked man, a voice that sounded too calm. We spent the night in my mother's house, curled on the couch like kids afraid of thunder. But we didn't cry, we didn't panic, we planned. And at 8:30 a.m. the next morning, I sent the message. All files, all documents, all audio, to every contact on the list. And then we waited. The story exploded. The Everett Network, they called it. A labyrinth of cover-ups, forged identities, financial crimes, environmental devastation, and a secret family web that spanned continents. My father became infamous. A ghost held up in headlines. A man remembered not for what he built, but for what he buried. There were investigations, lawsuits, arrests, CEOs stepped down, old allies turned on each other. Mason Leary vanished again. Whether by choice or force, I don't know. Maybe he got his closure. Maybe he didn't. But something strange happened in the aftermath. People listened to me. They saw me as a survivor, a whistleblower, a daughter caught in a legacy not of her making. I was asked to speak, to write, to tell the story over and over. Each time I did, I made sure to focus not on my father, but on the people he left behind. My mother, Hannah, Clara, and me. Hannah and I moved into a small house together not far from Glenhaven. We didn't try to pretend things were okay. We went to therapy. We yelled. We forgave. And every morning, we made coffee in silence and looked at each other across the kitchen table, grateful that we were no longer strangers in a shared nightmare. Sometimes I still hear footsteps when I'm alone. Sometimes I find a note slipped under the door. No threats anymore, just questions. Was it worth it? And the answer is always the same. Yes, because secrets don't die with the people who keep them. They wait for someone brave enough to dig them up. And I did, even if it almost killed me. Even if the man I once called father turned out to be a stranger wearing my name in his smile. Because in the ruins of his lies, I found something real. Truth. And a sister. And that's more than he ever gave us in life. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe and like the video.